And that's what we're seeing now for the first time. Antitrust laws being applied to the tech companies most of us use on a daily basis, and in such an intense way. Many countries are now pursuing legal action against these social networks and apps that are now seen as a threat to the markets. And this is a major change. We are now seeing big tech beginning to experience the level of government scrutiny given to banks and healthcare and telecoms. A lot more accountability and oversight than ever before, and this is just the beginning.
It's not only consumers' user data and privacy under threat. There's also the threat of monopolies, which can undermine fair market competition. So help us understand about the negative impact of a monopoly, and why should consumers like us care?
Well, here's what a monopoly does. It exists when a company dominates the market and squeezes out the competition, and you create an environment where there is no healthy competition happening. So, in other words, a company might buy up other companies that are similar as a way of staying the top dog. You know, what Facebook is accused of having done to WhatsApp and Instagram. And that's being obviously prosecuted right now. So in the U.S., you've got 3 companies that control 80% of the telecoms industry, according to The Economist. There are 3 other companies that control 95% of credit cards. And Google itself controls 60% of our ability to search, get on a search engine. Google owns that. Well, the message is this isn't fair. This creates an environment where the markets are threatened. So when you own the market on something, and that means you've got the monopoly on it. And when you've got the monopoly on something, you don't have any reason to do anything that would prevent would-be competitors from digging into your consumer base. It also means you can charge any price you want because there's no competition there, and you can't be undermined. So that's what a monopoly is.
So let's dig more into what's happening in the U.S. regarding Facebook. 45 states are suing to break up the company. Why is there such a bold effort to divide the big tech companies into smaller ones?
Yeah, 45 of the 50 states have joined the Federal Trade Commission to sue Facebook. The suit says that for almost 10 years, Facebook has had the monopoly on social media, meaning they've owned it. The suit accuses Facebook of illegally maintaining what they call monopoly power by doing what the FTC likes to call buy or bury. So what does buy or bury mean? It means that Facebook buys up Instagram and WhatsApp and then buries it, kills off the competition, as we've said throughout this segment. And that's what the lawsuit is alleging. And it even quotes Mark Zuckerberg, a couple of emails, as viewing acquisitions as a way of what Zuckerberg called neutralizing a competitor. We'll see how damning this is for him. But the biggest charge the suit brings is that Facebook's monopoly power allows the social network not only to collect and use your private information however it wants to, but to also determine what content you see as a user. So there's also a case separately by the Justice Department against Google, which dominates how we search for things online, as we just said, about monopolies. So there's also talk in the tech community right now of how far the U.S. is going to go in pursuing privacy laws. Because, there's no doubt that the U.K. and China are going tougher than the U.S. is when it comes to regulating big tech.
How's China cracking down on big tech companies like Alibaba or Tencent in order to prevent the threat of a monopoly in e-commerce?
Well, China just this year passed an anti-monopoly law that makes it illegal for these companies to target specific people like you or me through what we do online. How do we shop? What videos are we watching? What games do we play? And track us, lack of a better word. So China's regulators have fined these platforms for not getting approval before snatching up other companies. You have to ask permission to do this. And China fined Alibaba 500,000 yuan for taking over a bigger share of the department store in-time retail without getting permission first. Alibaba is the home to Alipay, Tencent, home to WeChat. These 2 platforms dominate e-commerce in China. And recently, regulators suspended the IPO of Jack Ma's Alibaba Ant Group, which was valued at $35 billion. It never listed. So before all this, the Wall Street Journal had reported that Tencent, Alibaba, and Ant had a combined value of $2 trillion U.S. It's a tremendous number. So the new regulations are happening as China is pushing to encourage faster growth and protect its own market from a monopoly.
What about the European Union? They prepare to publish two most sweeping pieces of tech legislations in years. So how's this targeting Facebook, Twitter, and Amazon, among other tech companies?
Yeah, one of those pieces of legislation by the European Union is called the Digital Markets Act. Kind of a boring name, but it's got huge implications. So the Digital Markets Act is meant to prevent big tech from imposing unfair conditions on consumers like you and me. So when it comes to our user privacy, the conventional wisdom suggests that there's no place tougher in the world than the EU. And one expert interviewed by Reuters today said that the European Union wants to be the leader in tech regulation. 27 nations make up the EU. You're talking about 450 million people. And this week, we've seen aggressive moves toward major tech companies like Twitter. European regulators fined Twitter for failing to tell regulators about a data breach they had last year. And this is big because this week was the first time an American tech company has been punished by Europe for violating its data protection law. So Europe is known for giving its people detailed control over their own data. But Facebook is fighting this now by shifting its UK users into US agreements, which would put those users out of reach of privacy laws in Europe. It's quite a trick by Facebook, and it's being looked at externally right now. This has either helped or hindered Brexit, because the UK leaving the EU changes things regarding even these tech regulations and whatever Facebook is trying to do. So at the same time, the UK, they're trying to ban encryption. Facebook uses encryption on WhatsApp. Both the EU and UK are pushing Facebook to tighten their policy on content that promotes hate speech. And this has even intensified a spat between Facebook and Apple. Facebook feels singled out by the EU regulators, and accuses them of allowing Apple to get away with blocking advertisers from tracking them. And then, of course, Apple hits back to Facebook and says, well, your business model was built on invasive tracking. So we've got a lot of tension now between big tech companies, like we've never seen. And this tension is that much more obvious as several countries are all rallying to keep them in check.
Okay, thank you very much, Patrick. That's our Patrick Flannery. This is World Today. Stay with us. China has further reduced the number of sectors and industries that are off limits to both Chinese and foreign investors in its latest negative list for market access. Among the changes, the foreign companies are now allowed to purchase and explore for oil and gas in China. The restriction on foreign firms seeking to carry out carbon emission assessment in China was also lifted. So for more on this, my colleague Zhao Yang earlier talked with Zhong Gong, professor with the University of International Business and Economics.
So first of all, John, China has further reduced the number of sectors and industries that are off limits to both domestic and foreign investors in its latest negative list for market access. So what signal does it send, and why are the changes being made now?
Well, this signifies the fact that China is continuing down its path of further opening up. We've been doing this for many years up to this point. We have moved from the paradigm of a positive list, that means that the list only for foreign companies to enter, to a paradigm of negative list several years ago. And this negative list has been shrinking. So now we still have a list of close to 100 very detailed secondary, third, tertiary sectors that are open to foreign companies. I would expect that in the future, this negative list will keep shrinking actually. So I think the trend towards more opening up is unstoppable, is irreversible. As China is becoming increasingly integrated to the international economic order, as China becomes the world's largest trading nation, we can't afford not opening up. We can't afford really across the economy. So I think you're going to see more and more industries and sectors being opened up for foreign investment. And I think the question about why is it right now, I suspect this has a lot to do with China-European negotiation over this bilateral trade or bilateral investment agreement. I think it's probably we're probably getting very close to closing that deal. Actually, I think we have signed a couple of major free trade agreements lately. China has signed the RCEP. China is reportedly is interested in joining CPTPP, and I think China is very close to closing negotiation with the European Union about the bilateral investment agreement. So I guess the release of this negative list has a lot to do with that.
So what are the main changes for the new negative list?
Well, I think as you have already pointed out, the most significant change in that list is to remove the oil and gas industry from their list. That's like the epitome of China's industry has been closed to foreign companies in the past. Now, finally, it's opening up. I mean, this industry has been previously has been pretty much occupied by the three largest oil companies, state-owned enterprises here in China: Sinopec, Sino Petroleum, and there's another one, oil company owned by the state, by the central government. Finally, this industry is being open to foreign investment. That's a significant development in my view.
And as you mentioned earlier, publication of the list comes as China and the EU gear up the talk for about the landmark investment treaty. So, what are the sticking points for this treaty?
Well, my understanding is that there are sticking points on both sides. From China's perspective, we would like to seek a loosening up of the foreign investment review process in Europe, European Union, with respect to Chinese investments over there. Something similar to the CFIUS process in the United States. European Union does also have a process like that, and we like to be this process to be more open, more transparent, and more accommodating to Chinese investments over there in Europe. And I think from the European side, of course, it's the same story. They would like to see more industries being opened up. And there's also a couple of other, in my view, sort of minor issues related to, foreign exchange, movement, privacy protection, these kind of things. But I think these are issues that can be easily talked over.
And Zhang Ming, Beijing's envoy to Brussels, said last week that the differences between the two sides have been narrowed and negotiations on the market access and sustainable development were intensifying. And we know that both sides want to wrap up the deal by the end of this year. So what's the outlook for the investment treaty talks?
I think the statement from Mr. Zhang is very encouraging. It's very promising. I have a feeling that we're actually getting very close to that. I think they have the stated target of trying to close this deal by the end of the year. That means there is a very high likelihood that we're going to close this deal by the end of the year. We still have about 2 weeks left, and I think the announcement can come anytime. Hopefully before the Christmas. We need a Christmas gift or New Year gift for the Sino-European relations, and I can't think of a better gift than the bilateral trade agreement. Bilateral investment agreement between the two sides.
Mm-hmm. And how will the investment treaty benefit both China and EU?
Well, the benefits are pretty obvious. It encourages investments from both sides. European Union, the companies over there, they have a major investment interest, business interest here in China. They're doing very well. A real example is Volkswagen. I mean, this company has been the dominant automobile manufacturer here in China. It's the number one company here in China. They're doing very well. BMW is doing spectacularly well here in China as well. So there are, of course, other companies here in China. They're expanding their business. They like to have more market access. They like to see their investments being protected, intellectual property rights being respected, and all these legitimate demands that usually foreign investors would like to have. From our side, we have the same thing here. We're starting to see more and more Chinese investments in Europe as well. And we'd also like to see more market opening up, less restrictions on Chinese companies investing in Europe, for example, is to seek technologies to acquire companies that have wonderful technologies to have a combination of the scale of a Chinese market and European technologies, and it works out for both sides.
And how do you view the U.S. factor in the current China-EU relations?
Well, we like to maintain a good relationship with both the United States and the European Union. Certainly, from Washington's perspective, the new president-elect, Joe Biden, has stated that he likes to patch up the cross-Atlantic relationship and seek some policy coordination with respect to China. All these things are fine. I think from China's perspective, we would like to keep relationships with both sides, and we don't want to, we don't want to put Europe in a situation that they have to pick between the United States and China. And we hope that the United States will not force EU to make the same kind of a decision. This country versus that party. We like to keep relationships with everybody. We want to be friends to everyone, and we want to be foe to none.
Mm-hmm. And earlier you mentioned that China is also pursuing the multilateralism, and China will favorably consider joining the CPTPP. So, John, why is China now considering joining a bloc which was initially pitched as anti-China? And what message does it send to the world?
Well, I think the characterization that CPTPP is anti-China has been taken with a grain of salt, and I think initially it was indeed started by the United States under the Obama administration. It does have a goal, in my view, that it's somehow trying to establish a Asian Pacific trading bloc that's trying to deal with the China presence and existence, I think. But over time, I think this goal is somewhat diluted, especially after the United States withdrew from the TPP under the Trump administration. And if you look at the real contents of CPTPP, it's really a quite high level, more advanced level, or a progressive level of trade agreements, as well as investment agreements, actually. So there are many good clauses in this agreement, and I think by joining this organization, China's trading relationship can be largely expanded to include 4 more countries on the east side of the Pacific, including Canada, Mexico, Chile, and Peru. So this is a good thing. Certainly, China would like to join the CPTPP, as President Xi has stated, and I think it's particularly a good time to join right now, at least contemplating joining right now, given that the United States hasn't come back to the CPTPP yet.
And so, John, you mentioned the trade relations expanded, and China has just signed the RCEP. So how different is this CPTPP compared to the RCEP?
The content is a little bit different. CPTPP has clauses, for example, to cover labor rights issues, environmental issues, competition issues, these sort of more advanced topics and subjects that a traditional trade agreement doesn't cover. So CPTPP is more advanced than RCEP. It calls for more requirements in areas that are not covered in RCEP. And of course, the member countries are different. There's a great deal of overlapping between CPTPP and RCEP, including Japan, for example, Australia, New Zealand, Malaysia, these countries, Vietnam as well. But the CPTPP, I think most importantly from China's perspective, includes these 4 countries at the other side of the Pacific.
And the international analysts say the RCEP is a geopolitical victory for China at a time when the U.S. appears to be retreating from the Asia-Pacific, given President Trump's American First foreign policy. So what's your take?
I wouldn't characterize it that way. I don't think RCEP is a geopolitical entity against anybody. Certainly, China played a quite important role in the formation of RCEP, but I think RCEP is mostly led by the ASEAN countries. It's formed essentially to expand ASEAN countries' existing trade agreements with the three northern neighbors as well as the two southern neighbors. And the two southern neighbors are Australia and New Zealand. The three northern neighbors are China, South Korea, and Japan. These three North Asian economic powers.
That's John Gong, professor with the University of International Business and Economics. This is World Today with me, Glenna. We'll be back in a minute.